Welcome back to TMR's Check-In Podcast. I'm Daniel McCarthy, the Editor-in-Chief and Vice President at Travel Market Report. In this episode, we're thrilled to have Paige Blunt, the Senior Manager of Direct Connect and One Order at the Airlines Reporting Corp, or ARC, to share her extensive experience in the travel industry and to talk to us a little bit about what's happening with the most recent NDC moves by American Airlines and United. With over 3 decades of experience in travel, Paige has a wealth of knowledge to share with us, both from her time at American, where she worked as the manager of travel agency services and control, and at ARC, where she currently works as the senior manager of Direct Connect. During our conversation, Paige spoke about what's happening with NDC content and its impact on the travel industry. For those of you who are unfamiliar, NDC stands for New Distribution Capability, which is a travel industry supported program that allows airlines to provide what they call richer and more personalized content to travel agents and consumers. It's very much seen as the future of ticketing for corporate agencies and for agencies who currently ticket through a GDS. But its adoption, which picked up steam this month when American and United both moved full-time to NDC content, hasn't come without a lot of difficulties for travel agencies. There's a lot of questions about ancillary products, about refunds, about ticket changes, things like that. And we talk a little bit about those difficulties in this episode and then talk to Paige about what she sees as the best strategy for advisor adoption of NDC. I hope the content in this podcast is relevant for you. I know NDC is becoming an incredibly difficult topic for a lot of advisors. We talk a little bit about those difficulties in this episode and talk about what Paige sees as the best strategy for advisor adoption of NDC. I hope you find this content relevant and informing and helps you somewhat with this transition that the industry is undertaking right now. I want to thank Paige for her time, and I want to also thank all of you for listening. Without further ado, let's check in with Paige.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, Paige. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today, Paige.
My pleasure. Happy to do it. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, and you're based in Texas, is that right?
I am. Yes, I am one of the fortunate people that work from home. I mean, fully work from home, and I was one of the originals kind of to ARC to do that. So yeah, I'm in Texas. It's nice getting warm here, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm in New York, so it's getting warm here too. But I know you have experience. Did you end up in Texas? Because I know you had a role with American for a long time.
I did, yes. I was with American for many years. Probably not want to say exactly how many, but it was a little over 20 actually. But yeah, so I started out in Tulsa with them and then got transferred down here with a new job. And then, the merger kind of happened, and Lori, I had known ARC for a long time, worked on a lot of different projects with them. Lori knew that they had offered me an opportunity, but I couldn't move to Arizona. And so she called and said, "Hey, would you want to come and work for ARC?" And I said, "Great, I just can't move." And she's like, "That's fine, no worries." So yeah.
Well, I know you don't you spent a long time with American. I mean, a lot of times you spent was on the travel agency side, right?
Right. Working with travel agencies, I had the specific appointment group, which actually worked on accreditation with American at the time. I had the audit team that looked at all the travel agency transactions, debit memo servicing, and then risk management. So I kind of had a kind of an array through the travel agency world.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing you talk about that, those are a lot of especially since the pandemic, we've heard a lot about a lot of that stuff from travel agencies. And I imagine, you probably have experienced a lot of what the travel agency people have experienced, a lot of advisors, like you know what the pain points are, I guess.
I do. I have some good insight. Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a very unique business for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so was it a learning curve for you to learn all this stuff? I just because I know we have a lot of people coming to the industry now. A lot of these terms are big terms that needs a level of understanding that's sometimes difficult to get. I mean, for you, what was sort of the learning curve like?
Well, when I started with American, I kind of started in an area that I knew nothing about, which was actually in the servicing of these debit memos, right? I mean, with American. And so I asked a lot of questions. I was very curious. I didn't just go with this is what it is. I wanted to understand. I want to tell me why, not just this is it. And ask a lot of questions, and was able to, work my way through and up in American, because I was kind of inquisitive and I asked those kinds of questions, and I went to people in sales and marketing to understand why decisions were made, why contracts were written in a certain way. And then, as we all do in our careers, we move up, we expand our breadth of knowledge, and take on new responsibilities. So it is kind of just the way I have been working through my whole career, actually. And then when I went into the payments area for a very short time, that was a huge learning curve as well. You apply what you know and hope that you can bring something to that new job. And then I did the same thing at ARC. I had a good background, but was working in things that I had no idea. Sometimes you're in those meetings and you're like, what did anybody just say? Because I don't know what just happened. And I've been in the industry a long time. So, you kind of morph into it, and you really act like a sponge, which is the way to, I think, to really kind of get your feet wet and take it all in.
Yeah. And I want to ask about ARC. I want to talk about the NDC change too, but I just want to ask, because you've had a relationship with the travel trade for a long time. I mean, how have you experienced their changes? I mean, how have you seen that channel change during your time in the industry? How have the relationships changed? How have the people changed? Like, are there any big moments that you can talk about?
There are some big moments. I've seen, well, if you remember back in 1995, there was a commission cap, right? That came into existence. That was awful for the travel agency community. And every airline, put that into being, unfortunately, for them. It was difficult, but they also learned to be very resourceful. And we at ARC even have a product now called ARC Pay. It used to be called the Travel Agency Service Fee, but they have learned how to, really apply fees for their services that they're giving to their customers. So they have really morphed. They have really changed with the times. It might not have always been the desired way to have to play in a space, but they've made it work in most cases. Again, they're very, very intelligent, resourceful group for sure.
All right. So we spoke about your time with American, but now you're in this role with ARC. I mean, what's your role within ARC right now?
Well, my title is that I'm the senior manager of Direct Connect in One Order.
Okay.
I do a lot of different things. My main goal is to be sure that we are out in the marketplace, that people understand what ARC's Direct Connect product does, how we enhance that. The NDC schema and the way airlines are wanting to connect with their customers. My goal is to increase ARC's presence in that space. And then also looking even further to the One Order new mechanism that's coming or will be coming, and what that's going to look like for ARC as well as for all of our customers. So I have a pretty inclusive role, but I can't say it's fully defined.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong with any of this stuff I'm talking about, because I know there's a lot of information about NDC, about Direct Connect that maybe you could be a little sharper on and know more about than I do. But I was hoping we could start with NDC, because that's come up the last couple of weeks, pretty significant news for a lot of the corporate agencies that I speak to, and even some of the leisure agencies. NDC's been around a long time, right?
Yeah, it has been around a long time. I mean, IATA created this schema, the new distribution capability, and it was supposed to be a really an industry standard for a new way to provide access to, customized shopping capability. And that was back in 2015 when this all started. So it has been around for a while. It has not been as mainstream as it is now because it was in its infancy. But truly, things really started to pick up really more, I think I want to say about 2018. I have been on these groups for a long time with IATA, and so I've seen it morph into really what it is today.
Yeah, and so you touched on a little bit, but what was the thought behind implementing something like NDC, especially for the travel agency side?
Well, today, or at least even back then, right? When an agency would look at their, we're going to call it a green screen on their GDS, they would see all sorts of different fares and prices and booking codes for specific routes and things. But they didn't have visibility into what kind of seat can I offer? What kind of meal do they give to somebody? Do they have baggage? All of those, what we're calling today as ancillaries, they didn't have visibility. They could have great options in pricing for the airfare itself, but for the other things, they really didn't have that capability. But if you went to the airlines.com site, you had all that information. You had the ability to look at different options for your customer. Maybe that person always wants an aisle seat, or they always like to have a meal. You have that capability on the .com. What NDC is made to do is to allow customization for customers, for travelers. It is allowing the rich, what they're calling rich content, to be able to be sent to an agency in an aggregator platform so that the agency can also see all of that capability that the airline wants to offer. And they can personalize the offer for their traveler right from their own desktop instead of going to the .com site.
So it seems like a fairly significant shift and a fairly significant change for a lot of these agencies.
It is. Yeah. Definitely. And it's a mindset change for them as well, because they've done business in the way that they always have with the GDS for some, 30 years. And this is very, very different.
Yeah.
Benefits and detriments as well for them, because it's technology change.
Yeah, and I know technology change, again, like you mentioned, brings a lot of learnings and it brings a lot of things people need to adapt to. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's this term that people talk about now when it comes to this. It's called NDC ready. I was hoping you could explain that term a little bit to us too.
NDC ready is really just whether or not you are working with an aggregator. And an aggregator, a little definition there, I hope you don't mind, but an aggregator is someone who can bring in all of this different NDC content and display it in a way that you can actually shop. So in the way kind of you do with a GDS, you're just looking at fares and prices. This isn't what an aggregator does, but it allows all this other rich content to be displayed at once. And so NDC ready means, do you have a relationship with a partner who's an aggregator, who's able to give you visibility to this rich content that the airlines would like to be able to offer you? And, everyone is doing it a little differently. So to say there's one way to be NDC ready really isn't an option, because agencies really find their way individually. And it's not just kind of like you have a GDS and you choose which GDS you want to use. You need to choose your aggregator partner and your airline that you're going to partner with.
So what's the difference between a GDS and an aggregator? What would the differences be? And then are there any examples of aggregators? I know you said there's a lot out there and it depends on a specific agencies with specific needs, but I'm sure there's some examples of some that are being used. Yeah,
definitely. So a GDS, let's just talk about that first. That is where we were talking, like I say, about a green screen or at times a point and click opportunity, but they don't have this rich data. But the GDSs are all morphing another piece of their business into being aggregators also. Okay. So there are different partitions within the GDS, if you want to call it that. So in the case of, say, Amadeus, you have an Amadeus GDS, but you also have an Amadeus NDC platform. And the same with Sabre and the same with Travelport. But then there are also just companies that are only aggregators, like Travel Fusion, Duffel. There are many different aggregator companies out there that are supplying this content exclusively, not having this partition like one of the traditional GDSs does.
we saw some news this month about American, and I saw some news recently about United too, about significant changes. And a lot of the corporate agents I speak to are sort of, this is the hot topic for the last couple of weeks, has been this NDC switch. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of learning going on. There's a lot of adapting going on. I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, American was the first one to sort of make this big move this month. Does ARC have a role when these kind of moves are made from a major airline like American?
We do. There's a couple things. Talking about American first, American did make their big announcement. I think it was maybe back in December that April 1 was their day, right?
Yeah.
And they were kind of drawing a line in the sand because they wanted this shift to happen. And while it's been out there and they have been dangling options for agencies for quite a while now, probably a few years, it really hasn't taken hold, right? And so in order to really start moving this forward and providing their customers and their travelers with some options that they can't get today in the GDS, America was very, very specific. This is what we want to do. This is where we want to go. ARC plays a role in that because today American fulfills all of their NDC transactions with a company called Fairlogics.
Mm-hmm.
And they send all of the shopping messages to Fairlogics, and then Fairlogics does the actual ticketing. Fairlogics transactions come to us today and have for many, many years. And they come to us looking just like another airline ticket that's processing through our system. So agents have the ability to see all of their transactions, whether or not they're an NDC transaction or a GDS transaction, within our system on our interactive agent reporting tool that they use. They also get all of those transactions on their back office system file, which is called a BOSS file. Okay. So there is a pretty seamless experience for these agencies when an airline is using Fairlogics.
So speaking of American, I know the agencies I spoke to this week had some concerns, and I know maybe you won't be able to talk about a lot of these because this might be a question for American, but there seems to be, the worry seems to be that there might be a lot of extra work for agencies required of an agent for ticketing when they're booking through an NDC now, rather than when they used to book traditionally through the GDS like we spoke about. Is that your feeling? I mean, not just now because we spoke about how there's going to be extra work for learning, but in the future, I mean, does ARC feel that this is gonna put an extra burden on travel agencies and travel advisors?
It's a great question. It's a little difficult to say.
Yeah.
American's API or their actual schema is fully robust, but it's not necessarily only them. It is what their aggregator can intake and how they process and push out the information for the agencies to see. And every aggregator is in a little different position because maybe they are a little further ahead, maybe they're a little further behind, maybe their focus is on a particular type of transaction and they haven't rolled out another piece of the schema, and they will. And they're going to continue to provide this additional capability. But I'm not sure that everyone was 100% in the same place on day one. And I think that's where some of this concern is coming from the agents going, I want everything to work on day one. And I'm not particularly sure that everything could happen on day one. But I'm not an agent, so I really can't speak to exactly what they're seeing. I'm reading a lot in the press like you, so I'm hearing some examples.
That's what I'm hearing too, is examples. Like I mentioned in the beginning, like I'm not booking travel either. So I'm hearing these from agencies. Let's talk about ARC Direct Connect, because I know that's related to what we're speaking about now. Can you tell us a little bit about what ARC Direct Connect is and how it's relevant for these travel agencies?
Definitely. I mean, when we originally, heard about NDC and the capabilities it was going to offer, we saw that there potentially was going to be a shift in the way airlines were going to be reporting sales. As technology has really increased and advanced and changed, I mean, ARC had to provide and to really look deep inside to say, how can we help our stakeholders, change this particular landscape? We now have an opportunity with this to be able to offer a direct connect solution We already talked about the FareLogic solution, and that's in place, but our direct connect-in solution with NDC really gives airlines a little bit of extra capability. So they can send us we can ingest a SPUR file. We can also ingest a RET file. And a RET file is truly the equivalent to what an US domestic ASP ARC file is, but it's for the international markets. So the system provider reporting file, which is our SPUR file, is our normal way we ingest all of the data today. But the RET file, which to be honest, I can't give you the acronym for the definition of, is IATAs, right? And IATA settles the rest of the world except for the US today. So airlines like British Airways, who was our very first launch partner back in 2018, they decided they wanted to send us this RET format because that's what they're used to, right? So they wanted to send that to us, and we have a relationship with IATA where the airline can send their files to IATA, and IATA then sends the American portion to us, and we can process it. We drop it into our system. We provide the same customization for our agents, and we give them the opportunity to see all of that on their back-end system. Now, one of the big things that we offer these airlines is a little bit of customization when those files come into us. And we have some airlines like British who send it on the RET file, and we have some airlines like United that send it to us on a SPUR file. So we can receive both files within our system. We ingest them in a very similar manner. The airline is whole on the back end because we do settle and report all those transactions. But we offer the airline the capability of allowing these transactions to be locked down, which if they want to, the agency can't touch them. They can't change any of the fields. We have 5 modifiable fields that they might be able to change, like a commission field. Nothing that was going to change the integrity of the ticket, but we allow them to make a couple of changes. But that can all be locked down with an NDC file. And so that way, because the airline is truly pricing this transaction, they feel that that is a strong capability for them to be able to know that the file is going to pass through exactly as it was sent. So in this way, we've been able to, one, assist our airlines, and we've been able to really assist our agencies as well, because they still have full visibility to the transactions.
It'll give, and also it seems like to give the industry a larger picture of what exactly is happening when it comes to these tickets as well. Because I know when I spoke to Lori last year,
Yeah.
she mentioned that was ARC's, seems to be ARC's main goal right now, is to be able to aggregate this kind of data and able to paint the appropriate picture of what's happening inside the industry.
Exactly. I mean, very true. I mean, that is, we want to be able to provide as much information about transactions and about the airline industry and what's happening within it. And we want to be able to have all that data so that we can provide that information. And the Direct Connect program has allowed us to do so. We've had a pretty extensive onboarding process for an airline. It takes between 3 and 5 months for them to really onboard because we do a lot of testing of different files and scenarios. But it has really worked out well. And we have a list right now of 10 airlines that are in waiting to get started. We're kind of in different processes with all of them in testing. But it's really worked well, and we're proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far.
All right. So I have only a few more questions, and I just want to wrap it up with a few more on the NDC issue.
Yeah, sure.
I know, and I know a lot of these questions might be for an airline as opposed to for ARC, but I was hoping maybe you would have some guidance on some of them. But does an agency need it to do anything special for NDC now? I mean, we spoke about how it's changing the way they're booking. They're going with an aggregator instead. I mean, is there anything else that an agency needs to be aware of when it comes to this sort of change?
Well, I mean, I think other than knowing that you have an aggregator, but I think they have to ask a lot of questions, at least from what I'm reading and hearing, is that while I think the GDS aggregators have done a lot of webinars and different things to be able to promote and to answer questions, and the airlines have done the same.
Okay.
I think there are still some obvious questions that are being asked and that they're not quite sure how to manage. And so I think it is definitely needs to be an open dialogue between the GDS aggregator partners and the airlines and the agents, because just because you answer something one way for one person doesn't mean that the second person understood that same concept.
Okay.
So I think that education is still key and will be for the next, foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be on my end too, because I mean, a lot of the questions I'm getting is how is the NDC going to be handling purchases that need to be refunded, especially ancillary purchases, things like that. That's a worry I hear from agents. Also with irregular operations, there seems to be what happens with NDC tickets in that way too. But like you mentioned, the answer seems to be maybe a little more communication between the two stakeholders in these transactions.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And things like schedule changes, those happen for every airline every day in multiple sessions a day. I mean, it just is the way of the world. They're shifting times, they're shifting, schedule. And so definitely that is an issue. And I've seen that for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that it's understanding how to manage the business, because the airline would not have just opened something up where we didn't have a thought process on how to manage it. But you have to ask and you have to communicate to understand how to move forward.
And with that, I guess my last question is: would be your advice to these agencies who are maybe feeling overwhelmed with this the last month or so? Talk to your airline and then
talk to the airline, but talk to your GDS or your aggregator partner, because the aggregator partners have done this. They have been through this. They have, while they all have FAQs and things like that you can search yourself, they also have a lot of information themselves about different situations that have been happening. But I would also say, if you're a travel agency and you have a friend travel agent out there, maybe they've experienced something also that could help you. So even talking to your friendly competitors, shall we say, it might assist you as well. But other than that, I can't, because I don't have direct insight into how these work. That's the only real avenue that I can suggest. And unfortunately, there is no other real place for that information.
Yeah, well, I know, like you mentioned, the collaboration is key, especially among advisors. Everyone talks about the industry being sort of not non-competitive, but people not realizing, people willingly to talk to other agents just to help them review their business. So I think that's definitely going to happen. But Paige, thank you so much. I know this might have been a difficult conversation for you just because you have a level of knowledge that maybe I don't have. So I really appreciate you speaking to me.
Do it anytime. I'm thrilled to be asking and joined.
Yeah, and I'm hoping everything eventually is running very smoothly between, again, all these parties involved. And I'm sort of excited to see what the future is of NDC and how it impacts agency operations going forward.
I agree. And as more airlines come into this mix, as you said, United has made an announcement about using Farelogix also. As more airlines continue to move into this, I think it will be easier for agents. It's just right now, they've really kind of been, they're just really starting out. And it's new and change is difficult, but we all have been through a whole lot of change, especially since 2020. So it's just another thing to push through and learn about.
Yeah, well, it was really nice to talk to you. It was really nice to meet you. And again, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.